The sea was restless that night, the horizon stretched endless under the roar of distant thunder, and the glow of lightning revealed the dark silhouettes of warships cutting through black waters. Let me take you back to the Pacific, where the U.S. Navy ruled the waves with courage, discipline, and the spirit of steel forged in sacrifice and fire. There existed a weapon, one so devastating that it could have changed the face of naval warfare forever, 16 times deadlier than what any fleet possessed, a creation born from American genius and ambition, a tool of unstoppable destruction. But here lies the paradox of power. The weapon was never used, not once. It sat silent behind locked doors, guarded by secrecy and fear, because the admirals, the scientists, the men who had seen war's price, knew that some victories come not from the power to destroy, but from the strength to restrain. The weapon promised total dominance, but America did not need it to prove its might. Its sailors already commanded the seas, its technology already stood years ahead, its courage unmatched by any foe. That decision to refuse the weapon would echo through time, a decision that spoke of discipline, not doubt, and of control, not hesitation. This is the story of that weapon, the weapon America refused, and how in that refusal the world glimpsed not just the power of American innovation, but the wisdom of its restraint. The year was 1944, and deep inside the naval research yards of America, something extraordinary was taking shape, a weapon that promised to change the very nature of war, a creation that engineers whispered about as the future of naval dominance. Let me take you there. Rows of massive metal frameworks lined the floor, blueprints spread across long tables, glowing under dim yellow lamps. The air smelled of oil and ambition. Men in coveralls moved with purpose, sparks flying from welding torches as they worked on a sleek metallic form, shaped like a torpedo, but heavier, longer, faster, deadlier. It was designed to be 16 times more destructive than anything the Navy had ever launched. It could slice through the ocean faster than a submarine could dive, strike deeper, and explode with the force of an underwater earthquake. Every calculation, every bolt, every wire was born from American brilliance. This was not just a weapon, it was proof that when America set its mind creation, there was no limit, no rival, no equal. Yet behind the pride there lingered unease. The weapon's power was almost alive, unpredictable, sometimes uncontrollable. Tests showed it could destroy targets miles away with terrifying precision, but it could also veer off course, vanish into the depths, and strike back at its own fleet. The engineers sent reports filled with warnings, but Washington kept listening because America never feared innovation. It studied, it mastered, it improved it inside those workshops. The sound of hammers became the rhythm of progress, the song of invention driven by a nation that refused to stand still. They had built something beyond imagination, something that could make the ocean itself a weapon of unstoppable force. And soon the time would come to test it against the waves. The dawn broke over the gray Pacific sky as the waves rolled heavy and slow, carrying the scent of salt and steel aboard the massive American test ship. Crewmen moved in silence, faces tense, eyes sharp, hearts pounding beneath their uniforms. They were about to witness something no Navy had ever dared to attempt. Let me take you there. The deck glistened under the rising sun, the new weapon glimmering like a predator at rest, long, sleek, its metal skin reflecting gold in the early light. Engines roared deep below the surface, the hum of power building like thunder before a storm. The order came: fire. The weapon launched, cutting through the water with unnatural speed, leaving behind a wake that glowed white against the dark sea. Seconds passed, then the ocean erupted into fury, a blast so massive that even hardened sailors staggered at its force. The waves rolled higher than the deck water, and smoke, swallowing the horizon. When the spray settled, the target ship miles away was gone, ripped apart, torn to pieces in a single violent instant. The observers stared in disbelief, silent at first, then breaking into shouts of triumph, awe, and fear all at once. They had created perfection, and yet perfection was terrifying. But as the celebration echoed across the deck, a signal came from below. Weapons control system had failed mid-run before detonation. If the target had shifted only a few degrees, it could have circled back toward its own fleet. That moment turned triumph into tension, pride into dread. The power was too unpredictable, too wild for the sea, and deep down the men knew that it could destroy so completely. It could also betray those who wielded it. The trial had proven one thing: America could build the deadliest weapon on Earth. But even America knew that some creations demanded more than mastery. They demanded wisdom. The reports arrived in Washington, sealed in folders, stamped top secret. Each page carried both triumph and warning, written in the language of victory and danger. intertwined, the weapon had worked beyond expectation, and yet it had frightened even those who built it. Let me take you into the dim war room, where admirals gathered around a long oak table. Maps spread across the surface, the Pacific drawn in blue and red lines representing battles fought, and those still to come. The room smelled of coffee, sweat, and determination, the tension thick enough to feel in the air. These were men who had commanded fleets through fire, and chaos men who had watched sailors die and ships burn, and yet what lay before them now tested their courage in a different way. The head of the table sat an admiral who had seen Pearl Harbor, seen Midway, seen the rise of a nation that refused to bow. He looked at the papers before him, then at the officers surrounding him, and said nothing for a long time. The silence was heavier than the ocean itself. They knew the weapon could end battles in minutes. It could turn the tide of war with one devastating strike. But they also knew that one malfunction could sink an entire fleet, including their own. It was too strong, unstable, too unpredictable for a world still bleeding from the wounds of war. The discussion turned to morality and command. What does it mean to win if the cost is beyond control? When does power stop serving freedom and begin consuming it? America had built this weapon not out of fear, but out of strength, and that same strength now guided the decision to hold back, to refuse to unleash what they could not yet tame. It was not hesitation, it was discipline. And that discipline was what made America the leader of the free world. Night settled over the capital, quiet and cold as if the world itself held its breath inside the Naval Command building. Lights burned through the darkness long into the early hours as the debate reached its final moment. Outside, the wind carried the distant echo of freedom, the hum of a nation that had fought and bled, but refused to lose its soul. Let me take you there. The admiral stood at the window, hands behind his back, eyes fixed on the American flag, waving under the night sky. He had read every report, every test, every warning. He knew the weapon's power could erase entire fleets in one strike. But he also knew power without control was not strength, it was chaos. In his silence, he remembered the faces of sailors, young men who had fought through storms of steel and fire, who had faced death with courage and faith. They deserved protection, not risk. They deserved leadership, not recklessness. So when the final order came, he spoke with calm resolve. We will not use it. The words echoed like a cannon blast, not of defeat, but of command. America did not need to prove its power by destroying everything before it, because America already led through discipline, innovation, and purpose in that single decision. The admiral defined more than a strategy, he defined a legacy. The weapon would be locked away, studied, improved, and controlled for another age, when the world could wield such power responsibly. True strength is not in the strike you deliver, but in the one you choose to withhold. The admiral's choice became a quiet victory of its own, a victory of conscience and control, a moment where America showed that leadership is not measured by destruction, but by the courage to choose restraint, and history would remember that choice as the moment power met wisdom, and wisdom prevailed. The weapon vanished from the decks of warships and from the whispers of the fleet. It disappeared into storage under armed guard behind steel doors, marked classified, restricted, unseen by the world that was still rebuilding from the ashes of war. But within those walls, the story continued. Let me take you inside the hidden laboratories, buried beneath layers of secrecy and silence. Engineers kept working on the project, refining designs, testing new materials, chasing the dream of control over chaos. They called it a sleeping giant, a weapon waiting for the right moment when technology would catch up to its potential. American intelligence knew that other nations were racing to build their own superweapons, yet while they experimented with danger, America studied with purpose, calculated every move, and stayed years ahead in knowledge. The weapon became more than a tool, it became a symbol of what America could achieve when guided by discipline, rather than fear. In those secret halls, the engineers spoke quietly about the Navy's decision to withhold it. They respected it, because they knew that the hardest thing for a nation built on strength is to hold back when it can dominate. Years past, blueprints evolved, metal turned to memory, but the principle remained: power must serve humanity, not enslave it. And that truth was carved into every bolt and circuit, every design that came after. Even in silence, the weapon's legacy grew. It inspired safer systems, more advanced torpedoes, smarter guidance networks, weapons that protected rather than endangered those who used them. Refusal to deploy, it had not slowed American progress, it had sharpened it in secrecy and silence. America was still leading, still building, still mastering the art of controlled power. The war had ended, but the world did not rest. Nations that once fought on the same side now turned their eyes toward each other, their ambitions rising like dark tides on the horizon. The seas that had once carried the thunder of liberty now carried whispers of competition, fear, and secrecy. Let me take you there. A new kind of war was beginning, not of bullets or bombs, but of ideas and technology. The weapon that America refused became a legend among foreign spies and scientists, a ghost of power too dangerous to exist yet too brilliant to ignore rumors spread through enemy intelligence networks of an American torpedo that could outpace sound and shatter steel as if it were glass in the Soviet laboratories. Engineers tore apart captured blueprints, desperate to uncover what the Americans had built, but they could not recreate it because they did not understand the one element that made it truly American: discipline. While others rushed to create weapons of destruction, America refined precision. While others sought fear, America pursued control. And though the Cold War brewed beneath the surface, the U.S. Navy stood unshaken, anchored by the lessons learned from the weapon. It refused in hidden test ranges across the desert, and the deep sea new designs emerged faster, safer, guided by technology that had its roots in that forbidden project. The ghost weapon had given birth to a new era, one where American strength was defined not just by what it could destroy, but by how wisely it could build through storms of secrecy and waves of tension. The nation remained steady because America did not fear shadows, it created light to overcome them. And the world was watching, knowing that the country strong enough to say no was the only one truly strong enough to lead. Years turned to decades, and the world changed, yet the echoes of that decision still guided every ship that sailed under the American flag. The secret weapon, though never unleashed, had become something greater than an instrument of war. It had become a teacher. Let me take you there. In the naval academies, where young cadets studied history, they learned not just about battles and victories, but about choices, about the strength it takes to command with conscience. The story of the refused weapon was told not in lectures, but in reverence, a story whispered between generations of sailors, engineers, and leaders. It was proof that America's greatness was not measured only by the size of its arsenal, but by the wisdom that shaped it. The engineers who once built the weapon grew old, their hands worn from years of creation, their eyes still proud. They would walk the docks and see new vessels built from lessons born in secrecy. Submarines, faster torpedoes, smarter guidance systems, sharper, each design a reflection of knowledge forged from the decision to wait in the cold depths of the ocean, where steel met silence. America's ships moved with confidence. Every captain, every crewman knew they sailed not just with weapons, but with understanding, with mastery born from patience and restraint. The weapon that could have ended wars became the reason future wars were prevented, because the power to destroy was never as important as the will to control it. And in that truth the U.S. Navy found something eternal, that real dominance comes not from the roar of a cannon, but from the mind that chooses when not to fire. The Cold War burned and faded, the world advanced, and generations passed, yet the story of the weapon that America refused never vanished. It lived quietly in the halls of naval history. Its files still sealed its name, rarely spoken, yet its lesson echoed louder with each passing year. Let me take you there. Modern warships gliding across calm blue waters, sailors walking the decks unaware that the technology guiding them had roots in a weapon too powerful for its own time. In the hum of sonar systems and the quiet precision of underwater guidance, there still existed the ghost of that project, silent yet watching. Historians called it the decision that defined restraint, the moment America proved that leadership was more than dominance, it was balance, it was wisdom. Foreign powers had built their own versions of superweapons, some tested in secret oceans, some lost to history, yet none ever matched them. Control and precision born from American innovation. The difference was never just in machines, it was in mindset. While others sought to conquer the seas, America sought to understand them, to master not only the metal, but the morality behind it. That was what made the United States more than superpower. It made it a guardian, and so the story passed from classified briefings to naval archives, to museum walls where visitors stood in silence before faded photographs of engineers and admirals. They did not see men with holding power, they saw men protecting the future, because restraint in hands of the powerful is not weakness, it is legacy. And that legacy would guide America's Navy through every storm that followed, every conflict, every test of courage and conscience. For even as technology advanced and weapons grew stronger, the memory of that choice reminded them all that the greatest act of power is the ability to stop yourself from using it. Let me take you to the final scene. A quiet naval museum on the American coast waves, breaking against the rocks outside, and an old veteran standing before a display case inside rests a model of the weapon that the U.S. Navy once refused. Polished metal glinting under soft light, a silent relic of impossible potential. He looks at it not with regret, but with pride, because to him and to those who served the refusal wasn't a sign of fear. It was proof of strength not measured by destruction, but by discipline. By the courage to choose humanity over supremacy, America could have unleashed that weapon. It could have rewritten naval warfare overnight and sent shockwaves through every enemy fleet. But instead the nation chose a different kind of victory, a moral one, and that choice shaped the future of warfare itself. Let me take you deeper into that idea. Every war has its lessons, but few leave behind a legacy of restraint. The U.S. Navy understood that technology is only as noble as the men who wield it, that even the most powerful weapon means nothing if it costs the soul of the nation. So they moved forward, building better, safer, smarter machines, always grounded in purpose. And when new generations of sailors learned their history, they didn't just memorize battles. They learned values, responsibility, honor, control. That is America's truest power, not the guns on its ships, nor the missiles in its silos, but the wisdom to know when not to fire them. The old veteran walks away, leaving the display behind outside the sun cut. Across the sea, lighting the horizon in gold, he smiles because he knows. Some victories are not won by striking first, they're won by standing tall when the world expects you to fall. That was the legacy of the weapon America refused, and that is why history will always remember her, not just as the most powerful navy on earth, but as the most principled force the world has ever known.